Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock Blog, and I'm here with Adam and Joel for the 6th episode of Horror Express. And tonight we're talking about the 1981 movie Scanners by David Cronenberg. I don't know if we need to give the plot to people. This is probably widely known, but it's basically about telepaths who can, read thoughts, and it's actually more like they can connect with other people's nervous systems, right? Like, it's not strictly about the brain. But it's the movie that's famous for people's heads exploding, even though I think only one person's head actually explodes in the film. And it's essentially about two scanners who are the telepaths in this movie, where one is basically trying to track down and find the other. And a mystery sort of unfolds as he does so. And there's kind of an early 80s, I don't know what you would call it, but almost kind of like a corporate espionage angle to it as well. So Joel, I know you were the one that really was pushing this one, if I remember. So is there anything about the plot you want to bring up before we get into a general discussion? Or
Well, I would like to point out that, I forgot how noir this movie was. Because when you think of not just Scanners, but David Cronenberg's filmography in general, the real visceral, gunky, icky aspects of it is usually what jumps out to the forefront of your mind. The head exploding in this movie is a very iconic scene, but there's lots of nasty stuff that happens in this movie. And then you go off to stuff like The Fly or things like that, and that's almost all body horror. But the actual plot of this, like you said, is a mystery. It's like a corporate espionage mystery, and there's elements of missing identity, and there's a lot more moral grayness and mystery and stuff like that, which I'd forgotten about. So it's a surprisingly cerebral and engaging watch, in addition to getting to see people's heads explode in a fountain of gore. So
there's also a lot of gun violence in this movie too. There's sort of like a 70s grit to it, like that sort of Scorsese type. People driving by in cars and shooting each other. Sort of like the finale of Mean Streets or something. There's that kind of thing going on throughout the movie, which
Taxi Driver kind of thing. Also, I love the childish delight in your voice, and you're like, yeah, people getting shot to death.
To me, it's sort of it's somewhere in between Mean Streets and the Terminator. Do you know what I mean? It's that level of violence and being hunted down by somebody type of a thing, and sort of gun pornish. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of dwelling on. And I don't know anything about guns.
Gun porn is the right term for it.
I mean is
there is one gun porn scene.
There was a lot of fixation on that. Yeah, you know which scene I'm talking about. There was a lot of fixation on the gun and how it functioned, and do you know what I mean?
I mean, I agree with what you're saying. You're using it in a more literal, correct sense than the term is usually used. So I actually agree with you.
Yeah.
Usually it's used as gun fetishization in a sense that they're trying to make the guns, but this isn't a different gun porn.
It's more like that, and how some of the guns just looked a particular way. Like in the scene where they were taking Revik in the car for that first time, and the guy who shoots himself in the head had that. It looked like a Luger or something. I don't know guns very well, but whatever it was, it just had a distinct look that really fit the character. We didn't know much about that guy except for his hair and his facial expression, but he had a lot of personality that was oozing from him, and the gun seemed to be part of it. So, that's what I meant by gun porn. They're just the camera was sort of fixated on the gun, and the aesthetics of the individual guns were important. It was sort of ooh, this is a cool looking gun that we want to get into this movie, and it kind of makes a statement somehow, that sort of a thing.
True. Yeah. I would say more generally this movie does that with almost everything. I'm thinking about the computer scenes as well here. And whenever they take out what is the drug they use called? Every time that's taken out, there's a real focus, the mechanics of how they take the vial, they insert the needle in, and they pull the plunger back. There's something about it where, and Cronenberg likes that. He focuses on strange details, and we'll probably see that next week in Videodrome too. But...
Well, the scene where they go into the computer, right? That was really all the textures on the motherboard or whatever that was. I will say this, for a lot of early 80s movies that feature computers do not age well. And this aged pretty fine, I thought.
It did. Surprisingly.
It's interesting too because like I just had to jump to another movie too, like Existence, which is a 90s Cronenberg movie. It is one of the best movies about video games, even though it's by a guy who never played video games. It's like he just has a good mental grasp on technology that I think a lot of people have not had over the years.
Yeah, and Existence is a very good movie. I haven't seen it in ages though, so I'm always wondering how well it'll look after. It's been about 20 years, I think, since I've seen it.
I think I'd say it ages well because one of the things that Cronenberg was doing with that movie is he wanted to make a computer movie that had no CGI or computer effects in it. So it's like there's nothing.
That's true.
There's nothing that could age about it badly. So
and the console stuff was all fleshy, like right.
Yeah.
It was
So,
it was a very unique movie, and I remember it being very mentally jarring. Just sort of the,
it is. I don't want to wander too far afield, but I do want to draw the comparison because we're talking about Cronenberg more broadly there.
Sure.
That like there's a comparison in this movie too with the computer to a central nervous system, and then when we kind of go inside the computer, that's how we feel. There's something organic and like alive about it.
Well, yeah, I remember like to jump even further afield, like Gibson. Gibson, I remember an interview with him where he was talking about when he was writing Neuromancer, like the reason he came up with the concept of cyberspace was he was talking about how when he'd watch people using computers, he always had this feeling that they felt like they were going somewhere, like there was this space behind the computer. And I mean that, the kind of internal shots in this, I think, have a similar effect.
Yeah. Well, we should probably... this would be a good time then to talk about the premise itself, because that is the premise, that idea of, they take like this idea of ESP and kind of like it seems like it's taken from this concept of the military maybe trying to create telepaths for war, and this is how he, imagines that in the real world. And he creates a world, and obviously it's not really the military in this case, it's more, well, we're going to give spoilers, but more like Paul Ruth invents this drug and it has this side effect in the 50s.
Yeah.
And all of the...
I like the corporate I like the corporate ambivalence in this movie. Like when they have the scene with the board early in the movie, it's like they're not even like, it's not like they have some grand plan. It's like, oh, this thing has happened. Do we want to destroy them? Do we want to exploit them? And there's just this whole combination. It is very gray, as Joel said earlier. Well, it's like in what their purposes are. It's just they want to try and, if they can make money off it, great. But it's not like it's some huge evil scheme in particular. But
and it's just interesting world building because like the genesis of it is this drug that's given to pregnant women, and the kids that are born have this ability, and so it seems like it's kind of contained to that area. Do you know what I mean? Because you know what I mean, like all the people that were, it's not. I don't think this is like a global phenomenon yet in the setting, unless I missed a crucial piece of dialogue.
No, you're right. And actually, because I believe that was all shot in Toronto or Ontario. It's a Canadian city, and it's not the first time he shot one there. I think he shot Shivers there too.
Yeah, Toronto is where he worked out of usually. So.
Okay.
And like I actually think that the building they keep cutting to, like the main corporate building, might be the same one from Shivers. It looks really similar. Like that architecture is pretty specific. But I like to point out that not only do I think you're right, I think that the character of the environment, like the city itself, is actually like there's something about it, like both in this film and more generally in kind of noirish sort of cinema, where the city is a character, and in this one there's this sort of impersonal kind of like claustrophobic element about this city that makes it feel isolated, even though I'm sure it's a fine place to actually live, but the way it's shot and especially the windowless interiors we keep getting presented with really makes you feel kind of like institutionalized and imprisoned, and it really works for the movie.
Yeah,
it really
the architectural choices of locations are very deliberate. There's a definite aesthetic he's trying to set through the choices of the buildings. I agree.
Well, especially for the what was it, the Consec building?
Yeah, the Consec building.
And, and I like how they sort of, there's this feud going on almost, where like the boardroom meeting that you talk about is because the famous scene where the guy gets his head exploded is a demonstration where they're trying to go public, or at least let elite people know about this project in some way, and the guy is going to put on a demonstration of the scanning ability, but somebody who is also a scanner has worked their way into that demonstration and volunteers, and he's the guy that makes the person's head explode, and that guy becomes the main villain of the movie for us, and he's got a very go ahead. I
was gonna say, we brought up earlier, there is just kind of the one scene with the head exploding there, but it is a point where that character is trying to destroy this corporation's attempt to monetize. He's like trying to destroy their program by doing it. So it is, the exploding head thing is him making a demonstration. It's not like there's a good reason why he does it that time as opposed to any other time people are killed throughout the movie.
Yeah, and he's doing it too, I think, because he's killing anybody who is a scanner that is part of the concept project. But he's also got somebody inside concept. So there's this there's just this really interesting thing going on, and it's like it makes the hero's quest in the movie just feel, again, it's kind of got like a Terminator angle to it, where it's just like he feels hounded and hunted, and and there's a, I don't know, I like the sense of danger that creates throughout the movie as the character is sort of solving the mystery of what's going on.
He is on the run from like the first scene. I'm sorry, I'm having some issues with my computer here.
Oh, we can still hear you.
Or can we?
What are you doing, computer?
Are you with us, Joe? Oh, Joel, I think you're back.
Yeah.
I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, as soon as I started talking, my computer decided just to have a little aneurysm.
Just turned into gravy for a moment.
Was I like doing that thing where my voice like just holds on something? 'Cause it's really annoying.
I felt like time was slowing down. I don't know exactly what was happening, but that was my.
I was being attacked by scanners via phone line.
Yeah.
So what were you trying to say?
Well, even though there's not like, because in the Terminator there's a constant sense of being on the move and try like being one step ahead of the Terminator. In this one, it doesn't feel exactly like that. But the way that the threat,
and there's a good reason for that, by the way, that we find out at the end. But go on.
Oh yes, there is. Yeah. But the way the threat kind of just insinuates itself into scenes like that you wouldn't expect it to be in, and then just violently starts destroying people. It's pretty shocking and effective, and it does consistently put you on edge while you're watching the movie. So it kind of accomplishes the same thing with a different route, which I thought was fascinating.
One of the things that I found interesting about the movie too, before I want to get into individual characters, because I think that's really probably the best way to talk about this film, but I want to talk about the scanners in general and like how they're portrayed and how the movie conveys what it is they're doing, because I feel like this is. I know I've seen scanner parodies. I can't remember anyone in particular, but I feel like it's a sort of thing where you could imagine like Andy Samberg doing a Scanners parody or so. You know what I mean? It's that where it's all sort of the intensity of the look and like the movements of the head and like the physical acting that goes and the way that every actor kind of does it differently. Like Michael Ironside's, when he's scanning, he almost has this animalistic thing going on. Like there's these growls and like his lips are sneering, and it's just got a particular look. And when Vale does it, it's almost like a magician. Do you know what I mean? He's got like a very stagey sort of like his eyes are bulging out of his head, and it's all very dramatic though. Do you know what I mean? It's always dramatic and physically kind of like the actor has to really sell it just with their movements and stuff. So
there's nobody drew on like film frames in this movie or anything like that. It's all practical effects, and just like there's a lot of sound use in this movie, which is really good.
The sound is a big part of it,
but like that had to be hard to act, and they do sell it. Like you really get the feeling whenever someone goes into a seizure really early in this movie, and it's really effective because it looks like they're actually like seizing. Having actually seen that in real life, unfortunately, like it's a unsettling moment, and you feel like sympathy for the character, and that's really good physical acting.
And you didn't feel sympathy for her a moment ago when she was being needlessly cruel to the protagonist. So it's interesting that it sort of, again, I think that's one of the reasons why you maybe were characterizing it as morally gray. Is you know
yeah, bad things happen to bad people, but it's still stomach churning to watch it happen because the camera doesn't shy away from showing you how awful these things are that happen to them.
Well, I mean, with the security people in the building, for example, I mean, they're just security guys that work in a office. It's like, yeah, they're in the position of being the bad guys, but it's not like, they're not like the main villain or anything. But,
well, even the main villain, like, we see a film reel of him and how much he struggled with his condition.
Yeah.
He drilled a hole in the front of his head to let the demons out or whatever. So like, yeah, there's a dimension of sympathy for these characters, and they're all some various shades of gray. It's wonderful.
So why don't we start with the villain then? And we should say we're going to do spoilers. Like, from this point on, you were going to hear things about the plot that come out at the very end that are meant to be a surprise.
Yes, and they are good surprises. I would personally strongly recommend you do not spoil this movie for yourself if you haven't seen it.
Yeah. So Michael Ironside plays Daryl Revick, who's the scanner who is trying to destroy, like, basically it seems like his goal is to take over the world ultimately, but initially it's more like he's getting revenge against the people who made him or were trying to control him. And then we find out that he's actually much more significant than that. He's the son of Dr. Paul Ruth, who was the guy who's heading up all of this research, and the guy who invented what was it, ephemeral? Was that the name of the drug?
Ephemeral.
Yeah. And so, and again, it's a very early Michael Ironside performance. So it's
he is fantastic, by the way.
He's probably the best person in the movie in terms of acting, I would say.
He is, like I said, we were talking about the expressions, people are using and stuff, and like, he is just like possibly the best special effect in a movie that has very notable special effects. Just the way he makes it feel like he really is psychically doing something whenever he's up to it.
And that, like, he has a really big range in the movie because, again, going back to that film reel, like, he seems like a person that's dealing with horrific daily, like, torment and pain, and he doesn't really seem less evil at all. I know that seems weird, but again, like, he's beyond being tormented, he deals with that torment in a very unhealthy and terrible way. So that's like, that kind of comes through in his personality.
Well, he drills a hole in his forehead, and we know, which is interesting because when we first see him, he's got this mark on his forehead. And you're like, what? It's subtle enough that it's like, is that even an effect for the movie, or is that just something that's on the actor's face? And they actually, I noticed a lot of people in this movie have marks on their faces that are so it sort of blends in as a result. But it turns out he tried to drill a hole in his head to let the voices out, basically. And I think he said to make room for Daryl, which is kind of a theme in the movie, where the scanners are so overwhelmed by the sounds of people's voices because they hear all their thoughts that it's almost like in an extreme case, like with Cameron Vale, he has almost no sense of self at the start because there's just his head is just full of people, basically. And so it turns out that this guy is the son of the big doctor, and he's plotting this really horrific like takeover where the scanners will be the ones ruling the world, and he has this vision of like a scanner empire, basically. And so aside from the acting, any thoughts on the character?
Man, it's so weird to have a genuinely sympathetic villain that you still kind of hate just because of how monstrous he is. Very, very difficult to walk that line, and I think Ironside nails it. So it's a wonderful performance.
Well, they do a good job of having him eliminate and brutally dispatch people who are pretty harmless seeming. Do you know what I mean? Like a good example would be the Benjamin Pierce character, who's actually become this great artist. So you kind of want him to live because you see how in this setting he's an important person. He's making this fabulous art that is important, and he's also kind of like a recovered, criminally insane person, right? So who is recovered because of his art. But when we meet him, he's actually very meek and very gentle mannered, and so you just wouldn't want him to get, slaughtered the way that he gets slaughtered in the movie. And the same,
they almost tear him apart with bullets. Like there's a few scenes like that whenever there's gun violence, and like Godfather 3 had a couple of scenes like that. But when he's shot, it's not like, oh, they shot him and he fell down like a Western. It's like they take chunks out of his arm and legs, and he's like howling in pain and staggering around and bleeding.
And he seems pathetic. He doesn't seem equipped to even really deal with it. He's not, so.
Yeah, and I think interesting that the scene with Benjamin Pierce too brings up the fact that Cameron is acting as an agent for Dr. Ruth through this movie. So it's just like even though he is the protagonist, really his job that he's given in this is he's not really working for the right side for most of the movie, even though he's unaware of it. So, when you have the scene with Benjamin Pierce, like, yeah, you're full of it, I don't want to deal with you, whatever, it's like, yeah, he's totally right to try and drive this guy out.
Well, and go ahead.
That was an interesting kind of dual journey for the hero, because on the one hand, he's got a mission from this organization that's basically puppeting him around, but he also has like a journey of personal growth and discovery where he's got to solve these really vital mysteries and learn who he is and forge emotional connections with people, and it's a really good little watch for that.
Well, we should talk about the Cameron Vale character then, because we met him as he first starts out as a homeless person and is quickly tranquilized after that scene with the woman that he causes a seizure in, and then that's when he meets Dr. Paul Ruth, who later is revealed to be his father, and he's revealed to be the brother of Daryl Revick, and so I guess I want to talk about his acting first, because the acting is something that everybody kind of comments on with this character. So I want your feelings about the acting and any thoughts around that.
I mean, I didn't have a problem with this guy. This isn't the only Cronenberg movie this dude is in.
He was in Dead Ringers, right?
He was in Dead Ringers. He was in something else by Cronenberg, too. I don't remember what it was, though. But Cronenberg keeps trying to make this guy a lead, and I feel like he had the potential for it. He's got good presence. He's got kind of a Humphrey Bogart look. It's not quite the presence of Humphrey Bogart, but the look he's got really down, which helps with the kind of noir aspect. I really like him. I think he's got star potential, and it's weird his career never really went anywhere.
Well, a lot of people don't like the acting that he does in
really?
this movie.
I think the thing is that he's got a really hard role in this, because he is supposed to essentially be a blank person.
Yeah,
it's like, that's a really hard thing to convey as an actor is, I've got to be blank. It's like, it's like Michael Ironside gives a great performance, but it's like being this brutal, animalistic person who's got a lot of anger, and it's like that. Those are easy things to convey. Not to say he doesn't do an especially good job at it, but it's, I mean, what Stephen Lack, the actor, has to convey in this is a tough thing. And I mean, I think too, a lot of people don't pick up on that. There are parts where people refer to the fact that how he just didn't have a sense of self at all. The Kim Obrist at one point talked about how he's barely human and that kind of thing. So it's like, it's a deliberate thing, and I think a lot of people just don't pick up on what that character is supposed to be.
Yeah, that's because it's interesting, because in the scenes where he's not talking, the acting is discernibly very good. Do you know what I mean? Like the scenes where he's scanning people and stuff. There's something about the physical performance of that is really compelling. And when he talks, it's like it's and again, I don't know, because I have not seen him in enough movies to really say how good of an actor he is. But in Scanners, it comes off as bad acting initially. But when you start thinking about the character, and like Adam was saying, he's kind of like we were a little unclear on what his background is, but it sounds like he was literally didn't have a childhood potentially. Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't know exactly what happened to him, But basically, what his brother said is you were put on ice and they took you out when you were needed. And we know that he has no childhood memories. We know that he hasn't really had any space in his head to develop as an individual because of all the voices that he's always hearing. And so it makes sense that that's how he would talk. Do you know what I mean? That he would have this really odd way of speaking that's almost like soulless. But because he's saying things where it sounds like there's supposed to be emotion in there, it could be bad acting or it could be good acting, depending on how you.
Is it racist to say he just seemed Canadian to me? Like, does that make me a bad person? No. Okay, because I know some Canadians, and I'm like, that's like how Canadians talk. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's nowhere near like the level of Keanu Reeves, and like that's really stiff acting in a lot of roles.
No, you know what it is there's a monotone to it, and although there's also something in the rhythm of when he says things, there are like pauses in between words that feel odd.
Well, that's where you wanted to say A really bad, but he was straining it.
But the thing is, I thought about it. I was like, well, what if you had somebody performing like more in a more lively way? It wouldn't have had the same effect. Do you know what I mean? So
that wouldn't have felt
right. Whether it was good acting or not, I think the casting was on because even if like Cronenberg deliberately hired somebody who couldn't deliver a good line of dialogue, it still served that purpose. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, it still functioned right for the role.
Yeah. So I mean, but it's striking because it sounds like really typical 80s bad acting. Do you know what I mean? It's got that, like when you see like a lot of those straight to video movies that we used to watch, and they'd have the somebody saying something that's supposed to be filled with emotion, it just comes out dead.
Flat. It's
like that. But again, back to what Adam said, the guy is supposed to be like a new person, so it just kind of makes sense in this movie that he would talk that way and it would have that vibe to it.
And of course, you've also got these really, like I said, you've got, Revok is a really over-the-top character, and Patrick McGoohan as the doctor. It's like he's someone who's this really meaty actor. So you've got these people around him doing these really kind of juicy parts. And so I think he comes off even flatter compared to that.
That's true, but I also noticed that there's almost like different. It's like they're. I don't know enough about acting, but I felt like we were getting different varieties of acting styles too in this movie. Where like the Dr. Paul guy had a really weird physical man, like he would do this thing with his arms like that. Do you know what I mean? And he was like a really weird guy at times, and it worked for the character.
He was like collapsed in a chair and sunk into himself in so many scenes. You notice that?
Yeah. He had like a real weird just way of contorting his body and all these things, and Patrick
McGoohan is good at playing very different kinds of roles too. It was like I thought those were really interesting choices with his physicality through the whole thing. I noticed that too.
And it was kind of similar to the Benjamin Pierce character too, which kind of made me wonder if Benjamin Pierce was maybe another one of his sons because their mannerisms were kind of similar.
No, we don't really. Because it might be. Like, we don't know.
I mean,
why would Revok even... I mean, Revok did go to kill the guy, so I don't think so. I mean, because he made the exception not to kill his brother.
But but we know that Benjamin Pierce had tried to kill his family. So maybe there was bad blood there. Do you know what I mean? Like, and again, I'm speculating and inventing stuff whole cloth out of, an arm gesture.
That's a very Davis move, but I will admit that's a compelling one. Oh, the thing is, like you do sometimes go off these whole cloth things, but I've never encountered one of those that I didn't find at least somewhat compelling.
Okay, well, that's good at least. The arms were just striking.
Was his family, or was he like put in another home or something? We know that Cameron wasn't really raised in a traditional, he wasn't raised by his father. So I guess the question, who was the family he tried to kill?
Well, we have no idea how Cameron was raised, right? Like like he could have literally been on ice for all we know. Do you know what I mean? Like it's so vague. Again, unless there's like some piece of dialogue that I just didn't notice. But like I feel like
Yeah, that's
it's
a very
really
ambivalent
unclear.
line. It's like, was he in a cryo chamber, or was he being
Yeah,
metaphorical? The movie
yeah,
Yeah,
because
how
it's a
literal
science
is it?
fiction
Yeah.
movie. It's not inconceivable that in a world where scanners exist, that a cryo chamber would exist, or or
Yeah,
who
like
knows?
70s, early 80s Cronenberg, anything is fair
Yeah.
game as far as the interpretation goes.
I like to imagine that he was went into part A of the teleportation chamber from The Fly, and they just switched it off before he got to part B, and they're like, "Oh, we'll get to it."
Yeah, we just don't know. I mean, Paul Ruth doesn't seem like much of a family man, but you do notice at the beginning of the movie he seems a little tender towards Cameron Vale. Like he puts his hand on his ankle or something. Like it looks like a fatherly gesture potentially. Do you know what I mean? So
I don't know, but how do you explain the scene where he's just walking people in and watching him convulse while he's going through?
I mean,
like,
he's
that's
not.
really
I'm not
gross.
saying he's going to win Father of the Year. I'm just saying he.
Oh no, really?
He might. He probably still had paternal feelings, and there might have been, like, I don't like, maybe like another possibility I thought of is maybe they did have a quasi normal childhood because Daryl seemed to recognize Cameron and seemed to know him. Do you know what I mean? Like he seemed to have like almost like a rapport with him, and Cameron is the one who doesn't have any sense of who he is. So maybe he got mind wiped or something. Do you know what I mean? Maybe he had maybe they did have a normal childhood in the Ruth house, and then
maybe after after Daryl freaked out and tried to murder everyone, it's like, okay, I can't have this other scanner around the house anymore, and that kind of led to whatever happened to him after that, whether he was literally on ice or not.
But he could have had maybe like what they meant was he was in the household and then he left it under a situation like you might have described around the age when you would not really have any memories of your childhood anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, he's the younger brother, so it's entirely possible.
But it's interesting. But I like the reveal of the relationship between those three characters at the end of the movie. I think that it works really well.
So this scene is carried by Ironside's acting too, because he actually seems sympathetic towards Cameron.
It's I mean, he turns pretty quickly, but he does have some genuine concern there at the beginning.
Once things aren't going his way, it really escalates very, very, very fast.
Yeah, you're not listening to me. All right.
I mean, he is the older brother, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I'm an older brother. That's
and Dad is dead at this point, so But what was that?
I'm an older brother, and like that was a very believable scene for me. I was like, yeah, that's pretty much what I would do. Yeah, listen to me. Your head's going right in the toilet, kid.
But it's just like imagine that relationship, but the older brother has scanner abilities, and But yeah. So, what did you guys think of that final showdown at the end between them?
It's one that I thought would make you speculate, Brendan. That's what I thought about. Because I was thinking about that in the drive to work today. I was thinking about it. I was like, that's a really good scene. I'm pretty sure I know what we were supposed to get out of it. But I'm willing to bet that Brendan has some alternate ideas.
Okay, well, what I got out of that scene is at the end that Cameron had put his mind into Revik's mind, and that he was...
Yeah, I think that's what we're meant to get out of that, because there's that kind of moment where he's holding the fire in his hands, and Revik is screaming in terror or whatever's happening to him.
Yeah, and then and also Cameron's eyes pop, and then when we see Revik, his eyes look like Paul's eyes. So,
and he's wearing the coat. He's like crouched in the corner, and he's got the voice even. So,
well, I think another element too is before we even see him in the corner, before we even see he has the coat on top of him, she's like, Cameron. It's like she senses him with her power. It's like she senses Cameron's mind. So it's not even just his voice is coming out even before she sees him. So.
Yeah, because I didn't speculate. I mean, I was much more focused on this Benjamin Pierce parentage speculation than on anything with this scene.
You didn't cook up a scenario for this.
That's too bad. I won't say I'm disappointed, but the scenario that I cooked up was, does it actually matter if he completely devours his brother's mind if they meld so perfectly that ultimately he evens them both out? Does that matter?
Well, here's what I will say. I think the reason why he was able to do that was because of the time he spent with Kim Obrist's group, where he learned how to join with other people's minds. And so I think it's totally possible that he hasn't destroyed his brother, that they just both are living in balance in the same mind now. And that is kind of an early 80s trope. Do you know what I mean? Like thinking like the Dark Crystal of like bringing balance between these two things. So I could see that being another reading of that scene where it's just that he's brought balance to to his deranged brother's mental state. Do you know what I mean? So
it's like the happiest ending this movie could possibly have. And
I thought it was a really optimistic ending. I mean, that was because initially you think, oh my god, the protagonist was melted and died on the ground, and I mean, this was a horrific way to die. Like there's like tracks of blood vessels bulging in the effects were amazing for this period. Like that they didn't, obviously there's no CGI because of when it was made, and I don't think a CGI movie could come close to how this made me feel physically when I was watching it. Like I felt like oh my god, I feel what they're feeling right now. Do you know what I mean? That's how this, and what they were feeling did not look good. It looked really really bad. So
yeah, the veins I think got to me because they bulge out and then they like squirt these tiny little Kurosawa-esque fountains of blood out of them. Ugh, makes your skin crawl.
It's like everybody has looked down at themselves and seen veins bulging out, but you don't, well, hopefully you've never had the experience of feeling those veins bulging out. And you know what I mean? Like, that's what it was like. It's like you can feel the pressure in their body from this buildup of what I guess is blood pressure, because they mentioned that they can control blood pressure and stuff. So I assumed it was related to their ability to kind of affect a person's cardiovascular system and their blood vessels.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, too, as far as this scene goes, too, because, I mean, basically the goal that Revik has, he says, I'm going to pull you into me. And it's almost like Cameron is fighting it, but then he kind of just, I'm going to go in there, and boom, it's kind of a move where he kind of uses it to his advantage, where he does go in there and takes control. That would be one possible interpretation. Is rather than fighting him and then both completely annihilating each other, he kind of goes with the move.
Yeah, no, and that seems more Cameron Vale's style too. He's kind of a gentler, person than his brother.
Yeah.
And also, it's worth mentioning, this scene is the scene that's sort of on the cover. Like, this is the image you would recognize from the cover. I
think my copy actually has Revik.
That's the
movie poster right there.
It's kind of a spoiler, isn't it? Huh?
It is, but it isn't, because you can't recognize him. Like, if you see that, because I remember that from like all the movie posters as a kid, and you don't draw a connection between that and Daryl Revik the first time you see him, I think.
And it's also you don't know exactly what's happening. Like we know that like that's kind of Revik's potentially his defeat, depending on how you interpret the ending. But I mean, it could just be him being monstrous and doing horrible things to people too. So it's kind of an ambivalent image out of context.
It also is important to point out that he's wearing a very similar outfit to the guy whose head explodes in the trailer, as well as in the movie. It's the most famous image of this.
And they kind of look a little bit similar too, which I think that might be a little bit deliberate. What was the name of the guy who was working with Revik?
Let's see if I can call it up here. I've totally forgotten his name. I even looking at the list.
He's an important character.
Keller, that was his name. Yeah.
Keller was his name?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess that's Lawrence Dane who played him. He's an important character. He's kind of the evil corporate guy, in a way,
he's the most villainous character, really, because I mean, Revik, at least he has these motivations that are crazy and murderous, but there's at root, he is, it's like basically it's like Keller doesn't seem to have any motivations behind other than like totally selfish ones that he's trying to take advantage of this situation and
there's no real element of pathos with him. I concur. He just seems like a slime ball.
Yeah.
Well, he murders Paul Ruth. He tries to murder. What was that?
No, my computer's still stuttering. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh,
We should probably discuss that scene before my computer actually melts.
which scene do you want to discuss?
The computer melting scene.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's the scene where Vale connects with the computer system through the phone, and when Keller realizes what he's doing, he has them initiate the self-destruct, hoping to cause harm to Vale, which he seems to fail at. I don't think Vale really gets hurt by it that much, right?
There's something about the severing of his psychic connection with the computer, though, that makes everything explode in an almost comedic moment. Because when it's done, like deleting everything and burning the hard drive down, one of the computer scientists is just like, "See, no fireworks," and then immediately his monitor explodes violently, propelling him through plate glass behind him.
Yeah, and the phone melts. The
phone line melts. One of the mini cars that explodes in this movie explodes.
There's excessive car explosion in this movie. Like the car in the first scene with Revik that crashes into the wall and just immediately bursts into flames.
I know. It's that is like real. It just took me back to American Psycho for a moment. Actually.
Yeah. It's a similar type of thing. It's
like American Psycho is doing it purely as kind of this heightened, almost comical effect, I think. Whereas in this movie, it's ambivalent. It's like, was it just because that's what happened to cars when they crashed in 70s and 80s movies, or was that like a deliberate...
Well, it was the era of the Ford Pinto, so maybe car explosions were on people's minds.
That
was around the time, right? I seem to remember hearing those stories as a kid.
I didn't think that was late 70s, so this is close enough to the same era.
Okay.
Yeah.
Granted, that's when you hit him in the back, it's supposed to explode. But
yeah.
Still,
oh yeah. But that also might be like it might be deliberate in the sense that it kind of is sort of tipping its hat at an idea of like this broader corporate negligence and danger thing, because like a corporation that didn't give even one whiff about the safety of the children that were ingesting its formula that created an inadvertent psychic army.
Bring it to references. Like, of course, it's a reference to thalidomide too, if you guys are familiar with that story. But
the famous
flipper babies,
infamous, thalidomide babies. I'm familiar. But yeah, I think it might just be like a broader like that. Maybe I'm overthinking it because it might just be that it's the early '80s. Of course, car explodes.
Yeah,
but here's the thing: we see other car accidents, and that doesn't happen. And all of the other violence is excessively violent, but fairly grounded in reality. Like, it's not... Like, you know what I mean? Like, maybe the shotgun blast that hit Pierce was a little bit broader than it should have been. Do you know what I mean? But, like... But it was all pretty realistic. But that car exploding really leaps out in your mind. Maybe it was just an awkward moment in the film where a decision was made and it doesn't quite feel like it matches the tone of the rest of the movie.
Maybe they just put too much explosives in the car by accident. It was just a much bigger effect. But like, whoa, that got a little carried away there.
I don't know,
the car's gone. We got to use it.
I would believe that, but the reaction of the actors in the scene is to that intense of like an explosion and fire, because they're like, we've got to get them out of there. They're burning to death.
Also,
He
did later make
being serious in my suggestion.
He did later make Crash too, so maybe he just really likes cars.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing actually. Yeah.
And tries to go to Metropolitan where there's an indestructible car. So.
This car certainly was not indestructible.
This was the prototype it failed.
I do love how the guys run out immediately and try to save them, and then like the guys trying to rein them in because he knows that Revik is a danger, and the situation just spirals out of control very quickly.
I do love how horrifically that spirals out of control, because it goes from he's totally in their power and they've got it all sewed up to everyone's dead but Revik and he's laughing at them.
That's kind of how everything.
Meeting them summarizing, just to like all these people died and blah 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 when they go back to the board meeting scene.
Things do just kind of unfold inevitably in this movie like that. Like there's that scene, there's the Benjamin Pierce scene, and then the other group that we haven't really talked about, the Obrist group. the people who are basically like hippies living in an apartment building and communing with each other. And I mean, those people that they cast in that role, they all looked the part, right? Like they all looked like the kind of people that you would see at a group like that, and so it totally fit. But even that scene, it just kind of like, it just unfolds. Like in another movie, I feel like that group would have at least had somebody guarding the door. Do you know what I mean? But here, it's just kind of, nope, the people walk in and just start dispatching.
They had someone guarding the door that immediately fails in his job and gets dispatched.
You're right.
Was he? I thought.
Right.
Where was he?
On the stairs or something? Who gets pushed down the stairs? Yeah.
But he kind of walked in the room as they were coming in, right? It wasn't like he was standing guard.
They meet him at the bottom of the stairs, and he's like, "Oh no, you're here to kill me!" And they kill him, and then walk up the stairs. And the hippie circle is so immersed in their scanning each other that I guess they just don't notice it, because those dudes walk into the room, and like they have like a full minute where they're like positioning themselves and getting ready to kill, and no one is paying attention to them. The hippies just suck at self-defense. I'm sorry.
Well,
sorry, hippies.
And then that leads to them trying to escape in the car, and then another, more car violence and a crash.
I like that crash too.
Through the record store, right? The record store.
The thing, it smashes into the front of the record store and then just skids in and like flips on its side. Does not explode, in a show of incredible restraint by Cronenberg.
Yeah, no, good crashes are a lost art in movies these days. It's a shame.
And you also get that great line from Kim Obrist about, like she's freaking out after that happens, and it's because she like knows what it's like to die now. Which it's just like a freaky like. Oh my God, that's got to be a horrifying experience to be in somebody else's head when they die, and now you know what they just like, to know the feeling of dying is that's something that no living human really knows. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so, it's well delivered. Oh God, it's a creepy line.
So I think we should talk about the body horror and like the psychological horror of the movie then, because the movie is about. I mean, it's body horror in a number of ways, depending on how far you want to stretch the definition of body horror. I mean, just from the fact that it has people's heads exploding, and it has all the horrible stuff happening to people's bodies because their hearts are being made to go faster or whatever it is, but also people getting into your mind and being able to hijack your body and have it do what they want rather than what you want. I would classify that under body horror too. As well as a kind of psychological horror.
That one in this movie really does push the boundaries of both of them, because is that psychological horror or body horror? Well, I mean, it's unambiguous whenever heads are exploding, that's body horror. Whenever veins are bulging and spraying blood, but like the more insidious element of that, where your brain is being reprogrammed to be someone else's brain, that is a part of your body. It permeates your selfhood in a very disturbing way.
I don't think the movie draws that big of a distinction between body and mind. I think, sorry.
That's a good point. That's a good point. That, I mean, your mind is your body in Cronenberg, I think, without a doubt.
And especially when he says that, a computer has a central nervous system and you do, and it's all about connecting the central nervous system. He doesn't say it's about connecting the mind to the mind. It's not. It's not that kind of telepathy.
Soul or spirit. It is very physical.
It's more with nerve endings are involved, it seems, and brains are just another type of symbol. You know what I mean? Like another type of substance like that in your body. So
there's no soul body. Split in Cronenberg's.
And so,
going back to her, I mean, the thing is, when she knows what it's like to die too. I mean, once again, there's a movie from around the same period, Brainstorm, where people are recording people's memories, and someone sees, in part of the movie, someone is playing a recording of someone dying, and of course in that movie it's like, you kind of get a glimpse that they're going to heaven and blah blah blah, and it's like, no, that's not what it's like when you're in someone's head when they die in scanners. It's a very different thing.
Well, to me too, the implication was maybe that she realized there was no afterlife. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. So
Okay, that's what you're saying?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, so that was going. And Brainstorm, they go the opposite direction, where it's like this recording. They have to stop the recording before she gets sucked in and dies. But it's like, but still, the thing is, oh, the worst thing that would have happened is she would have gotten pulled away with the angel who was pulling the person away to heaven. You know. So
Yeah, it goes the route of confirming the afterlife instead of specifically and clearly dismissing it, which is much
yeah,
bleaker, of course.
yeah,
And it adds an edge to death, because it's not like anyone went to heaven in this movie. No, they just died. They're gone now.
yeah.
Well, it's just the way that she delivered that line made me think that she had it seemed to be a dark revelation about death that she had.
Yeah,
So,
she wasn't
Exactly.
happy about knowing that, like, the reality of death.
and so yeah, I guess we're getting kind of close towards the end here. What are your feelings about the movie? How do I know we're not doing ratings and recommendations, but we do have kind of a final thought moment. Also, I one thought I had watching this too was I know Stranger Things is still kind of popular. This is definitely a movie that anybody watching Stranger Things probably should check out, I would say.
Yeah,
It's it definitely has there are things in Stranger Things that are drawn from Scanners. But yeah, so what are your final thoughts?
Now, you want to go first, Sam? You want me to go first?
you can go.
Okay. This is one of those kind of progenitor movies. I don't know that the movie itself is super amazing or anything. I really enjoyed it, and I think that it's worth going into fresh, even though it's a little slow paced, and I could use a little more body horror. I'm used to later Cronenberg, where he had a bigger budget and there was more viscera and gore. I'm looking at you with The Fly, and especially Videodrome, which I'm salivating for. But the body horror that is here is very effective. There's a lot of surprising, unusual things, like the gunpoint we were talking about. I didn't remember that going into this movie again. I watched it like years ago, and I watched the scene where the gunman who's being controlled by Revik is going down to the basement to execute the folks, and he's got his gun and he unpacks it, and there's a lot of like, that's an interesting thing to shoot. First of all, a lot of movies don't have that kind of patience anymore, and also like it added tension to the scene. It was wonderful. Because it's kind of bookended with the scene, the execution scene that got them to that point, which is where they were in the hippie circle and the guys came in very leisurely style and executed a bunch of the defenseless hippies, which usually I would cheer hippies getting killed, but in this case it was pretty gut-wrenching. What I mean when I say it's a progenitor movie is that you can see the DNA of this in everything from Stranger Things to Akira to like any time there's any kind of psychic and there's anything like visceral about it, you can almost like directly draw a parallel to a scene that happened in this movie. So even if you just watched it to get that, like, he's a grandfather of all like visceral psychic movies, it's still worth watching just for that purpose. So yeah, I found it enjoyable, and man, Ironside really does steal the show. Another thing where if you only watched it for his performance, you wouldn't walk away disappointed. So maybe not the deepest thoughts, but it's a fun little romp.
Yeah, first of all, I'll agree with you that, yeah, it's not like this is like Cronenberg's greatest movie or anything. It is it is a good movie. I think it's a good Cronenberg movie even, but it isn't on the scale of like Videodrome or something where he's just completely on fire. But I'll go the other direction though, because I do think it is a progenitor. It was a very influential movie, but I think it's got its own influences, like things that came before it. Because I mean, it's an 80s movie, and the 70s psychic thing. I mean, you've got like the Stephen King novels like Carrie.
Yeah.
And Stephen King himself was heavily influenced by Theodore Sturgeon, like More Than Human, which I think was like 1953. That is a book dealing with misfit people with weird psychic powers that is I've never been able to find whether Cronenberg read Theodore Sturgeon, because he's also got a number of short stories.
He definitely would have been aware of Carrie, though. Carrie, he definitely.
Well, everyone was aware of Carrie. Yeah, that was huge. But Theodore Sturgeon, like that's who Stephen King is riffing off of when he's doing his psychic stories of people having exploding bloody noses and all kinds of stuff going on. Firestarter, of course, which I think is actually 80s, but that's another one in that category. And but yeah, I think anyone that's interested in this kind of thing should check out More Than Human by Sturgeon. And you may want to check out Alfred Bester too, like The Demolished Man, which isn't as visceral in its psychic powers, but it's a really interesting examination of a world where telepaths exist. And so I don't know, I'm gonna end with those recommendations for people to check out.
And so I mean, I think this is like a classic film. I probably have more positive feelings towards it than both of you because
Oh no, I have very positive feelings to it. I just don't think it's the height of Cronenberg, which
Okay.
is a very high height. I think Scanners is a good movie.
Well, I would put it like in top 5 Cronenberg for me. That's where I think I
Okay.
might differ from you guys. But I do realize the difference. Like, it's different from The Fly. It's different from Videodrome. Do you know what I mean? It's different from, Existence and these other movies. But I feel like part of that is just because, like I said, it was sort of all around as a kid growing up in the 80s. And Adam's a little bit older than me. Joel's a little bit younger than me. And I was kind of right in the middle of Scanners, sort of, when we went to the horror science fiction section of the video store, Scanners was perpetually there. Do you know what I mean? And it's one of those things. So I'm admitting my bias, but I feel like I like the noirish elements. I like the corporate espionage elements. I like all of those early 80s elements that kind of, a lot of times, again, I've noticed with movies from this era when I watch them, either those elements stick out like a sore thumb and they don't age well, or they just kind of fit in very nicely and I'm reminded of things. Right down to like the mall sequence at the beginning when they go into the mall, and I just remember malls looking that way. They don't look like that anymore, but I remember them looking that way. And I remember people being able to smoke in malls and all those kinds of things. So those little details, they again I will have to admit to a certain degree of nostalgia with a movie like this. But I liked the way that they wove computers into it, and I just liked the world building of it. I thought it was really clever. It wasn't like grandiose world building. Do you know what I mean? They're not like creating a whole universe of these scanners, but they have a very functional, contained world that they create with this history involving the Doctor, and it kind of really comes together when they go to that primary care doctor who's prescribing ephemeral to people, and there's a baby in a mother's womb. The woman is pregnant, that scans one of the characters. It's a really, it's an odd, creepy scene, but it also kind of completes the world building of the movie for me. So I like it for that reason, and also it's just it's unnerving. The idea that people can get in your head like that is it's a very effective, telepathy horror science fiction film, and the special effects, even though they are limited, we don't have a lot of special effects. They're I would say they're pretty flawless for this era. There's a lot of really bad special effects from this time, and this stuff looks better than things that have come out 20 years later. So I feel like it really, and probably that was due to restraint. I feel like they didn't overdo it, and that's why the exploding head works. That's why the veins they found the few things they could do well, and they just did it, and they didn't elaborate on it and end up with all this crappy additional material that just was more flawed. So I really like the film, and yeah. So but I think we're all kind of in agreement in terms of general. This is a good Cronenberg movie worth watching, and we're probably all kind of agreed Videodrome is a better film. I think. I don't know. Actually, Adam didn't say that, so maybe. Well, you said he was on fire.
I will say it. I'll go on the record.
Okay.
I mean, maybe watching it again for next week, I'll suddenly go, you know what? Yeah, I've decided this movie's crap, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I got 2 words for you, James Woods. Go ahead and try.
So yeah. So I think I think that's where we'll end it. And do we know? So Videodrome is our next movie, right? We're going to be doing Videodrome next. All right. We'll be back with Videodrome, more Cronenberg, and then obviously we'll move on to something else. Hopefully something equally exciting. And until then, we will talk to you later.